So there's a lot of talk about a dating crisis for Gen Z. Do you think we're in the middle of a dating crisis? And are there any like terrifying stats that you can think about that really like emphasize maybe that point?
Yeah, we are in some ways in this weird dating crisis, and it's an unusual one because there's a couple of things that are happening at the same time. Thing one is that I'm the first generation, or my birth cohort is the first one, 1963, where people born in 63, women and men were equally likely to go to university. Prior to that, it was always men outnumbered women at college. And then in 63, it became equal, and then it switched. And so now, we don't know exactly why, but I believe it's something about the way schools are designed. Basically, what you see across the industrialized world is that in college, the rates are about 60-40 female male. And that, in principle, shouldn't be a problem because they used to be 60-40 male female in the 1950s birth cohort. And that wasn't a problem. But it is a problem in the sense that on average, women tend to date men who are as well educated or more, and men tend to date women who are as well educated or less. Now, maybe that'll change, but so far it hasn't. And as a consequence, what's become the case is that there's a number of women who don't find a match because there's not as many men as women who are at that level of education. And so already it sets up a problem where women are failing to find the kinds of men who they're looking for, and the educated men have lots and lots of options, which creates this what are called incels. People are involuntarily celibate because they don't have a good job, maybe don't have a good education, and they're no longer viable options for women. They're just not getting picked. Now that problem, that underlying problem, which may switch. Men may become fine with dating women who are more educated. Women may become fine with dating men who are less educated just because that's reality, right? Or, of course, ideally, we could fix the school system. But setting that aside, that then gets exacerbated by the fact that we use social media so much, dating apps, to connect. Now, on the positive side, dating apps appear to be a great thing to create long-term relationships. Relationships starting in the early teens, relationships that started online had a better chance of lasting than relationships that started in person, which is pretty remarkable finding because you'd think that meeting in person tells you all sorts of information that online doesn't. But what online does is it makes everyone available to you. And in the past, I had to meet somebody at the gym or at the restaurant or at school or wherever I went. And that was a pretty limited set of people. And so I didn't have a very wide slice of who I might meet and fall in love with. And now you can just flick until you find the perfect match. But of course, the problem is that following what I've said earlier, what you've got is this weird inequality. And so we have this index of inequality called the Gini index. And so every country is rated by how unequal people are on the Gini index. And so, for example, the United States is a pretty unequal country. Lots of people are super wealthy and lots of people are pretty poor. Denmark is a much more equal country. There's not super wealthy and there's not super poor. So its Gini coefficient shows much greater equality than America's. Well, women on Tinder or whatever your dating app basically live in Denmark. Most women get swiped right, so to speak, most of the time on these apps. They have lots of interest. Men, however, live in Peru or South Africa, some of the most unequal countries in the world, where about 20% of the men get about 80% of the interest, and the other 80% of the men are vying for a very small leftover bit of interest. Now, maybe that you'd say, well, that's not to say a bad thing. These 20% of the men are wonderful, but think about being one of those guys. You've got all these women interested in you all the time. Well, so why would you settle down? Why not date all of them? And that's basically what happens. And so the women who are swiping right think these guys are great, but the guys don't act great, and so they end up unhappy because the guy doesn't become a reliable dating partner. He's dating lots of people. And so they're unhappy, even though they're getting to date, at least briefly, the guys who they're interested in. The 20% of guys who are getting all this interest, they're happy as clams, but then the other 80% of the guys who are getting almost no interest are also very unhappy. Now, this system has to bust free in some ways. It's got to self-solve. It's just, I think what has to happen is that people have to start changing the way the apps work, or they understand, oh, that guy might look great, but actually he's not going to treat me great because he's just got too many options, and so he's not going to settle down. And so my guess is that we're in this weird piece of history where Gen Z is unfortunately in this awkward dating situation that won't last. But I don't know how I don't know what the apps will have to change in order to fix that. I just don't know.
Yeah, and something I've been talking about this a lot with my guests recently is like what the solution is to this, and like something that I think about when it comes to this a lot is that I don't think it's that women need to lower their standards because that's like attraction, like that's like something that's like primal and subconscious. I think what we can control is men kind of stepping it up in a way, and what makes me optimistic is that there's no more motivation to a man than trying to get a girl if he can't get one. And so my optimism is that since like, if these men will almost step up in a way, I hope, who knows, I could be wrong, or it could have the reverse effect where they're discouraged and they decide to become incels and they give up.
I suspect that both is happening, that some men get discouraged and just become a little bit misogynist, think, well, I don't like women, they don't like me. And some men say, okay, it's time for me to start showering and dressing well and get a better job and improve themselves. And what we always want is self-improvement, right? That's evolution. All of our emotions, all that is designed around self-improvement. Try to get you into the mating game, get you to be chosen for coalitions, get you to matter to other people. But the problem is that in our world today, you can still satisfy and entertain yourself. Like I think 100 years ago, you had no choice. You worked harder, you got yourself a nice set of clothes, you combed your hair for a change, you tried a better hygiene, and you got out there and tried again. And now you can entertain yourself in too many other ways, pornography being an example, that are pseudo-sexual, that you can semi-meet those needs. And so we actually see a big divide with people going both ways. And with little luck, we'll find dating apps that don't have that problem, but they don't currently exist.